I'm Margaret Callahan, though most call me Maggie, a 65-year-old retired nurse who's carried the weight of a 30-year betrayal like a stone lodged deep in my chest, its edges worn smooth by time, yet still sharp enough to draw blood with every memory that resurfaces. It was the fall of 1995, a crisp October evening in Boston. The air sharp with the scent of fallen leaves swirling along the cobblestone streets of Beacon Hill, and the distant tang of the Charles River carried on a cool breeze that rustled the yellowing maples, when I faced my former chief surgeon, Dr. Leonard Pierce, in the sterile, fluorescent-lit break room of St. Mary's Hospital. The room, with its scuffed linoleum floors dulled by years of foot traffic, a coffee-stained counter cluttered with half-empty mugs bearing the hospital logo, and a bulletin board pinned with faded schedules and a crumpled notice about flu season, had been a sanctuary during the grueling 12-hour shifts that defined my early career, a place where I'd shared quiet laughs with colleagues over lukewarm coffee. But that night, it transformed into a battleground where my dreams were shattered under the harsh glare of overhead lights. I was 35 then, a skilled surgical nurse with a steady hand that never faltered during the most intense procedures, and an uncanny ability to calm even the most panicked patients with a soft word or a gentle touch, my innovative sterilization techniques. Introducing a double-check system with UV light exposure that I'd researched late into the night after shifts, reducing post-operative infections by 20% in the operating room, earning me whispers of a promotion to head nurse among the exhausted. Staff who saw me as a beacon of hope. I joined St. Mary's in 1992 after completing my nursing degree at Boston College, where I graduated with honors, bringing a fresh perspective to a hospital struggling with outdated practices, rust-stained sinks in the scrub rooms, overworked nurses relying on outdated manuals, and a turnover rate that hovered near 30%. My name a quiet hope among colleagues who saw my potential to lead change and modernize patient care. But that evening, as I presented a detailed triage protocol proposal, complete with data from my night shifts showing a 15% decrease in emergency room wait times, a pilot program with local paramedics I'd coordinated through late-night phone calls, and a color-coded system to prioritize cases that I'd sketched out on napkins during breaks, to secure a $75,000 grant from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health and elevate St. Mary's status from a struggling community hospital to a regional leader. Leonard's demeanor shifted from mentor to adversary, his posture stiffening as he crossed his arms. "You're too emotional for surgery. Maggie, stick to bedpans," he barked, his voice echoing off the tiled walls, his eyes narrowing with a mix of disdain and ambition as he leaned against the counter, a smirk playing on his lips. He admitted, with a smug tilt of his head that made my stomach churn, that he'd stolen my protocol, redrafting it in his meticulous handwriting during a weekend retreat and presenting it as his own to the hospital board just days before my presentation, securing the grant and a commendation that hung framed above his desk, a trophy of my stolen work. To bury me and ensure his rise went unchallenged, he orchestrated my demotion with a web of false claims, unprofessional conduct fabricated from staged complaints about my overreacting to a patient's death during a routine appendectomy, where I'd cried privately in the supply closet after a 16-hour shift, and a conveniently timed system upgrade that lost my meticulously kept notes from 2 years of research, notes I'd stored in a locked drawer that mysteriously appeared unlocked, leaving me vulnerable. The board, swayed by his 20-year tenure, his connections to a wealthy donor who'd funded the hospital's new cardiac wing with a $2 million donation, and my lack of allies, my files vanished in that upgrade orchestrated by his loyal head nurse, a woman I'd once trained, upheld his decision in 1996 after a brief hearing where I was given 5 minutes to defend myself, relegating me to night shifts in the geriatrics ward, a dimly lit floor where the air smelled of antiseptic and despair. My career stalled, my reputation smeared across Boston's medical community as unstable and unreliable, a label that followed me like a shadow. My husband, Patrick, a soft-spoken carpenter with a love for Irish folk tunes that he'd learned from his grandfather, and a gentle soul that shone through his calloused hands scarred from years of handling rough lumber, supported me through the ordeal with quiet strength, but our savings eroded under medical bills after his back injury from a fall off a scaffold while repairing a church roof. Our dream of a cozy Cape Cod cottage with a porch overlooking the dunes fading into the cramped reality of a Back Bay apartment with peeling paint that flaked onto the floor, a sagging couch that creaked under our weight, and a leaky faucet that dripped into the night like a metronome of despair, each drop a reminder of our lost security. Those words, too emotional for surgery, stick to bedpans, became a relentless echo, a haunting refrain that reverberated through every quiet night shift as I adjusted 4 drips for elderly patients who called me Angel in their frail voices, every patient's pained cry that I soothed with a practiced calm. Every moment I sat alone in the break room with a cold cup of tea, the sound mingling with the beeping of monitors and the shuffle of nurses' shoes on the linoleum. I can still feel the weight of those early months after the ruling, sitting on that worn armchair in our Back Bay place, the hum of traffic on Beacon Street a constant reminder of my fall from grace as taxis honked and pedestrians hurried past. As I flipped through nursing journals and job listings in the Boston Globe, the ink smudging my fingers with each turn of the page, my eyes blurring with frustration and fatigue after sleepless nights spent replaying the board's decision. The apartment with its thrift store furniture, a mismatched table Patrick had rescued from a curb during a snowstorm, a kitchen chair with a wobbly leg that he'd promised to fix but never had time for, and a single window overlooking a brick wall where pigeons nested and cooed at dawn, felt a world away from the controlled chaos of the OR, where the clatter of surgical tools and the hum of ventilators had once been my symphony, its air heavy with the lingering scent of antiseptic I'd brought. Home on my scrubs, a reminder of the life I'd lost to Leonard's ambition. Patrick took on odd jobs to keep us afloat, restoring old doors for historic homes in Charlestown, where he'd sand away centuries of paint, building custom shelves for boutique shops in the South End where hipsters browsed vinyl records. His evenings spent sanding wood under a dim lamp in our cramped living room, the scent of sawdust and linseed oil a testament to his sacrifice, his hands rougher with each passing month, while I pieced together a fragile existence with part-time clinic work at a free health center in Dorchester, where gunshot victims waited in line, home health visits to elderly patients in Roxbury who offered me tea from chipped cups, and weekend shifts at a community clinic in Jamaica Plain, where I treated kids with asthma in a basement room, each patient a fight to reclaim my purpose, every dollar a step toward survival in a city where rent prices climbed relentlessly and our landlord raised the rent by $200 a year. Our daughter, Fiona, born in 1997 after years of hoping and praying in the dim light of St. Anthony's Church, grew up surrounded by stethoscopes I'd turned into toys that she'd drape around her neck, medical textbooks stacked beside her crib that she'd pull down to chew on the corners, her childish questions a bittersweet ache that pierced my heart like a scalpel. "Why don't you fix people in the big hospital anymore, Mama?" she'd ask, her small hands tracing the faded emblem on my nurse's badge, her green eyes wide with innocence as she sat on the floor surrounded by crayons, her voice a melody against the drip of the faucet. I'd smile through the lump in my throat, spinning tales of new healing adventures to help the world with imaginary patients in far-off lands, but the truth festered like an untreated wound. Leonard had blacklisted me, his narrative of my instability spreading to other hospitals through whispered conversations at medical conferences where I'd once presented curt rejections from job applications that cited cultural fit issues, leaving me scraping by on the margins of a profession I'd once loved, my name erased from the roster like it had never existed. Leonard's career, meanwhile, flourished like a weed in fertile soil, thriving on the nutrients of my stolen work and the silence of those he intimidated. By 2005, he'd ascended to chief of surgery at St. Mary's, his name engraved on awards from Harvard Medical School that lined his office walls, his wealth evident in a Beacon Hill townhouse with a wrought iron balcony overlooking the public garden where tulips bloomed in spring, a yacht docked in Marblehead Harbor where he hosted summer parties with lobster boils and champagne, and a leased Mercedes that gleamed under the hospital's porte cochere, a symbol of his unchecked rise. He hosted lavish medical symposiums at the Boston Marriott, the chandeliers casting golden light on white-coated attendees, his wife Eleanor dazzling in pearl necklaces and silk dresses at charity galas for the Children's Hospital, where she auctioned off vacations, his son James rising as a surgical resident with a promising trajectory, his thesis on minimally invasive techniques published in the New England Journal of Medicine, while I rebuilt my life quietly starting private nursing. Consultations by 2,000 from our kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator a constant companion as I balanced patient charts and Fiona's homework. My clients grew, a widower in Brighton needing wound care after a hip replacement who'd lost his wife to cancer, a young mother in Alston with a premature newborn who cried through the night, a veteran in South Boston with diabetes who shared stories of Vietnam over cups of instant coffee, each valuing my expertise, my reputation a quiet undercurrent in Boston's healthcare scene, passed along by word of mouth at church basements where I volunteered and community centers where I taught first aid. But the wound deepened with every milestone of Leonard's success, his smug lectures at the American Medical Association conferences where he'd cite his triage system, Eleanor's Instagram posts from Nantucket vacations with hashtags like #blessed, James's residency accolades published in glossy medical journals, each a stab that reopened the scar of my demotion, a wound that bled anew when I saw his name on a hospital billboard touting excellence in care. My parents, both gone by 2016, had believed Leonard's lies, their final years dimmed by his version of events, their letters filled with concern over my struggles and emotional outbursts after I confided in them during a tearful visit, their faith in me eroded by his charm as he'd sent them flowers after my demotion, their trust in me shattered. Fiona, now a nurse at Brigham and Women's Hospital, where she worked 12-hour shifts in the ER, struggled with the shadow of my past. Her early career marked by Leonard's influence as he sat on hiring committees and vetoed her initial application. Her attempts to reconcile with me strained by her childhood admiration for the man who'd once praised her drawings of hearts and stethoscopes during a hospital visit when she was 6, his smile a mask for the theft he'd committed. The turning point came 8 years ago. In 2017, when the first cracks in Leonard's polished facade began to show, like fissures in a dam ready to burst. His hospital faced a barrage of malpractice suits over botched surgeries, gallbladder removals gone wrong that left patients with infections, a cardiac procedure that left a 45-year-old father paralyzed from the waist down. Nurses leaked stories of overworked conditions and suppressed complaints on Reddit threads that gained thousands of upvotes. And a whistleblower exposed falsified patient recovery records in a scathing Boston Globe expose that rocked the medical community, the front page. Headline reading, St. Mary's Scandal, Cover-Up Alleged. At 58, with my knees aching from decades of standing during long shifts that stretched into early mornings, my hands trembling from arthritis that made bandaging a patient's leg a test of endurance, I began my discreet investigation, contacting old colleagues over coffee at greasy diners along Commonwealth Avenue, the clink of silverware a backdrop to their hushed confessions as waitresses refilled coffee pots. I'd meet them in the early mornings, my notebook a shield against the cold that seeped through the diner's drafty windows, listening to their tales of Leonard's decline. Overworked staff collapsing from exhaustion during 16-hour shifts, budgets slashed to fund his yacht while nurses bought their own scrubs, a culture of fear where dissenters were quietly fired and blacklisted over plates of scrambled eggs and burnt toast that stuck to the roof of my mouth. Last month, on July 20th, 2025, I sat with Ellen, a former nurse who'd left in 2013 after a nervous breakdown triggered by Leonard's pressure to falsify records, at a cafe in Cambridge where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the tension in the air, the hum of conversation a cover for our secrecy. Her trembling hands, marked by years of scrubbing in with harsh soaps, passed me a flash drive, its plastic casing warm from her grip as she clutched it like a lifeline. He's unraveling. Stolen protocols, doctored charts, pressure on nurses to falsify recovery times to meet quotas. She murmured, her voice thick with regret and the weight of her own silenced grievances, her eyes darting to the window as if expecting retribution. That triage system was yours, Maggie, and he's been riding it to glory while we suffered. My pulse raced, a surge of adrenaline cutting through the fog of arthritis pain that clouded my joints. This was the evidence I'd waited 3 decades for, a key to unlock the justice I'd dreamed of in the dark hours of night shifts. On August 10th, 2025, I reached out to Claire, a tenacious journalist at WBZ-TV who'd covered health scandals with a relentless drive that had earned her a local Emmy, meeting her at her cluttered newsroom on Soldiers Field Road, where stacks of files towered and the city skyline was a distant promise through grimy windows streaked with rain. We pored over the flash drive together, the dim light of her desk lamp casting shadows on grainy photos of my 1995 triage plan sketch drawn on graph paper, detailed logs of Leonard's theft spanning back to 1996, when he'd first presented it, emails hinting at bribed board members, and a $100,000 kickback scheme that funded his yacht, her eyes widening as she traced the paper trail with a red pen. "This could sink him, Maggie," she said, her voice a mix of excitement and caution as she leaned back in her chair, the creak of the springs punctuating her words. "But we need the perfect stage to make it stick and ensure the public sees the truth." On August 22nd, 2025, I dug deeper, turning my Back Bay kitchen into a detective's lair where the hum of the refrigerator was a steady pulse as I worked through the night, the faint glow of streetlights filtering through the curtains. Amid nursing manuals with dog-eared pages marked with my handwritten notes, coffee-stained charts from my consulting days that bore the fingerprints of desperate patients, and a jar of homemade jam Patrick had made from wild blueberries we'd picked in Maine, I accessed public health records online, my fingers stiff but resolute as I navigated the Massachusetts Department of Public Health database, the screen's blue light casting a ghostly pallor on my face. At 10 a.m., after hours of scrolling through bureaucratic jargon and redacted files, I found a 2019 audit report buried in the archives, a 50-page document tied to my triage protocol, now linked to a negligence scandal that cost St. Mary's $300,000 in fines and led to the suspension of 2 surgeons who'd followed Leonard's falsified guidelines, the report detailing how my system had been misused to hide errors. My hands shook as I printed the document. The printers were filling the silence, the past merging with the present in a surge of clarity that made my heart pound like a drum, the ink smudging slightly under my trembling grip as I stacked the pages on the table. That evening, at 6:42 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on August 28, 2025, I sat by my kitchen window, the Boston skyline, a faint outline against the pre-dawn sky where the first light touched the Prudential Tower, the distant wail of an ambulance a haunting reminder of my old life, plotting my next move with a cup of tea growing cold in my hands, the steam long dissipated. The Massachusetts Medical Conference was scheduled for September 20th, a glittering event at the Boston Marriott designed to mask Leonard's declining reputation with a veneer of prestige, where he'd deliver a keynote on innovations in emergency care to an audience of 500. I'd attend, not as the bedpan nurse he'd relegated me to, a title that had haunted my dreams, but as his reckoning, a figure forged in the fires of 30 years of resilience and silent ambition, my walker a symbol of endurance. What Leonard didn't know, as he polished his speech and adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror of his Beacon Hill study, was that I'd transformed my pain into a remedy for justice, a prescription honed by decades of patience. Every sleepless night a step toward this moment. Every patient I'd cared for a lesson in strength. Every tear shed a brick in the foundation of my revenge.